welcome back. I'm Pauline Grossman. I'm the Southern Duchess, and I have been promising you my onion tart recipe for a while. I think I've been teasing it. And I've gotten a number of private messages from people who have been asking when it was going to be posted. So this is it. This is the one recipe that my family has to have every Thanksgiving. Like collectively, if I don't make it, there's going to be a riot in my house. A few years ago, I didn't put it on the menu and I wasn't planning on making it because I thought everyone was sort of tired of it. And lo and behold, people were upset with it. And luckily I had about 4 onions in my house and flour, stuff to make a pie crust. So I whipped it together and we had it for dinner and everyone was happy and Thanksgiving was saved. So anyways, I'm going to share this recipe with you today. You're going to love it. Go ahead and get your ingredients set up if you're going to cook along. We have onions, heavy cream, nutmeg, fresh nutmeg preferably, but if you only have ground nutmeg, that's fine. Salt and pepper to taste. Go ahead and buy a pre-made pie shell. Lord, we're all cooking enough for Thanksgiving. It's one less thing you don't have to worry about. I am not doing a homemade pie shell for this one because I'm just making so much stuff. It's one less thing I have to worry about. So take that shortcut. It's worth it. So get your stuff set up and we'll meet back here soon. All right. Okay, moving into our first step. We're going to slice up our onions. I prefer a yellow onion because I feel like it has so much flavor when it's caramelized after it's been sauteed. So this is the preferred onion. Valdea is fine. It doesn't give off as much flavor for a recipe like this, and I would stay away from white onions. I would not use them for this recipe at all. So yellow onion is definitely preferred, and when I slice it, I want it to be about, not quite, but about a ½ inch thick, okay? So we want it to hold its shape. You could dice them if you like that shape better. It's completely up to you. Or if you're doing little tartlets instead of a bigger tart, then that might be a better shape for you. But you do want them to be probably about that big, about the size of a dime. In my bowl, I have, on top of my bowl rather, I have a wet paper towel. And I'm going to keep this on top because it keeps my eyes from watering because the gas that the onions release are attracted to that paper towel. And that is a great trick. I learned that a few years ago and it does make a difference, a big difference. Okay, so we're going to move on into our next step. The trick for this recipe is how the onions are sauteed. You cannot rush this process, and I think that's where people get a little impatient, and that's why I love these cooking along videos, right? It's like, get your stuff out. We're not going to be in a rush. We're going to really enjoy this process, and so the onions need that time. It's going to take at least 30 minutes for these to completely caramelize. So since I'm doubling my recipe, I'm putting in a whole stick of butter. But for one serving, for 4 onions, which is 1 serving, you only need ½ a stick of butter, okay? And I'm just gonna let this melt and not brown. So we're gonna let this melt, not brown. It's on medium-high heat. It's better not to rush the process like I said. So we're going to let this do its thing. Okay, and we're going to let it take its time. And this is unsalted butter. Okay, we do not want to use salted butter because we want to control the amount of salt that's in all our dishes, actually. I'm not a huge fan of salted butter. I would much rather just control those salt levels on my own. So I'm going to wait for this to melt. This is just going to take a couple minutes. All right, so now that all our onions are sliced, I have my Dutch oven. This is because the quantity of onions that I'm cooking, and also you don't want to overcrowd the pan. So if you have smaller saute pans, you might decide to do them in 2 batches. They'll actually saute much and caramelize much better if you do that. So I do have my large Dutch oven because I'm doing a double recipe. And the butter is completely melted and not browning. So it's sizzling just a little bit. I just wanted to give you a picture so you knew what it was supposed to look like. Completely melted. I'm gonna turn my heat down because when I put my vegetable in the pan, I don't want it to splash back up on me. So I'm gonna take these onions, add them, and I'm gonna kind of do them in stages. Not wanting to overcrowd the pan, letting them soften up, add a little bit more, same thing, let them kind of soften up. I'm gonna do one more handful. And that's that. So I'm gonna let these just come to temperature and soften up a bit. But before I do that, I'm gonna take a quick video so you can see what it looks like. Okay, that's how many onions I have in there. So you can see just starting to cook. And then this is how many onions I have left, okay? And they are really going to reduce. So it is pretty amazing how much you actually end up with when you start with this many. So this is the first layer. I'm gonna add them in stages and cook them slowly. So step one or stage one with the onions. Okay, so moving on. I want to be able to show this to you, okay? All right, see how those are starting to be translucent? That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna let them get translucent, right? And add in another layer of onions, same amount. So we don't want them to get any color on them yet. We're gonna wait. But we're gonna add these in batch by batch, one more handful. For me, it looks like it's gonna be about 3 batches. So I'm gonna let the same thing happen with this set of onions, okay? We're just gonna let them get a little translucent. The ones that have been in there are gonna start to probably get a little color on them. The butter's mixing up nicely with the onions, not too much. It's like the perfect ratio. And we're gonna let this cook down just a little bit. Again, it's probably gonna take just a couple of minutes. That was about maybe 2-3 minutes between the last batch and this batch. So probably about the same. You can hear it starting to come up to temperature. All right, so we'll meet back here in a few. Just let that cook. Press pause on the video. Let your onions do their thing, and then come back. All right. Okay, so they are cooking up a storm. The first batch you'll see has a decent amount of color on it. Now we don't want them to cook too quickly. That's the goal, is not to cook them too quickly, okay? I'm actually gonna reduce the heat once I get them all in there, but you can see the newer ones, the difference between the newer batch and the older batch. But see that color? Good. So I'm gonna add in the last bit. That's it. You can see why we need this giant pot. I love this Dutch oven, but I'm always cooking for a big group of people, so it's really helpful for me. But it's so good for like soups, stews, especially if you like to double up and cook and freeze or have leftovers. It's definitely worth it. And if something's going to splatter up, then I like cooking in this because it keeps my kitchen clean. Saves me cleaning stuff of having to get all the grease and the oil off everything. All right, so I'm mixing that in. Let's take a look at this so you can see. There it is. Wonderful. So we see, you can still see that color. Yep. There's a lot. See how I can get in there though, and there's a lot of movement. That's what we mean by not overcrowding. So I can get in there and stir. Things aren't falling out of the pot. That's always the worst. So let that cook up another 3 minutes for this one, another 3 minutes for this batch, and then we'll be back here moving on to the next stage. So the third batch of onions are starting to soften up. I'm actually going to reduce the heat. But before I do that, I just want to show you what they're looking like. So the color is what we're going for, okay? That sort of caramel color. Right, but see how the new batch still has a little meat to it? Those need to cook down. And when they cook down, they're going to get a lot more color on them, okay? So I'm actually going to reduce this to medium-low heat, okay? I just want to bring the temperature down. Otherwise, the bottom of the pot's going to burn, and it's going to burn because the onions are starting to release the sugar. And so because of that, you don't want to have a mess in your pot. So again, this is an easy recipe to make. Oh, that's the original Southern Duchess. She's in the house. That's an easy. This is an easy recipe to make, but it takes a little bit of time, and we don't want to rush it. So I'll check back in. I reduced my heat. I have everything covered evenly on my pot. I'm going to keep it stirring. So I'm going to let it cook for a couple minutes or a minute. Give it a stir. Cook for a little bit. Give it a stir. We want every piece to have an opportunity to hit that heat on the bottom of the pot. That's what makes it so delicious. So I'll meet you back here in a minute or two. Okay, all kinds of things happening in the house tonight. Mama is here. She's hopefully going to come make a cameo in a little bit. She just got here from Tennessee, and they're ordering dinner right now. So juggling all kinds of things. I'm sure it's the same way at your house too. All right, so we've allowed the onions to cook down. It's quite literally been probably 3 minutes. Not quite literally. It has been 3 minutes. And look at the color on those already. And I want you to see the bottom of my pot. See how nothing's sticking? That's really important. I reduced that heat. And because it's steaming too, it's pulling all the bits off the bottom. So it's really gorgeous. So that's what we're looking at. 3 more minutes into the process. That's really key. Okay, and then this is gonna be where I salt. Okay, so I'm gonna say, a couple of pinches of salt. We don't want to undersalt. We've been talking about that. For this, that was a teaspoon of salt. So let's say start with a half a teaspoon of salt. That will be probably enough. But none of these ingredients are salty. Okay, now this is my black pepper. As you can see, I'm going at it. This is one of those recipes where I think that it really needs it. Then, last thing, and this is the most important, I'd say, after the salt, is fresh nutmeg if you have it. So, if you have, I'm going to rest that on the lip of my, there we go, okay. Rest this on the lip of my hand. It just makes it a lot easier because the nutmeg is hard. So I'll probably do, for this amount, about 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and then I'll give it a taste in a little bit. But this is great, the fresh nutmeg. It's such a beautiful flavor, and if you can buy fresh, oh, I can already smell that. It's so decadent, so divine, so bright. It really is the secret ingredient. And along with the caramelized onions and then that buttery pastry crust and the custard from the egg, really is the perfect dish. And I think this is that's the reason why my family loves it so much. Why we just can't go without it. And why people just adore it. Now, if you are not a nutmeg fan, I have made this around the other holiday, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever other winter holiday you celebrate. I have put fresh thyme in this, and it's wonderful. It's a completely different flavor note. I also think that it would be great with some maybe Italian seasonings if you prefer that. I think rosemary might be a little overpowering, and you'd also need to fresh rosemary takes a little bit of time to cook. So I'm not sure that it's the right herb for this, but I would definitely say fresh thyme would be really beautiful with this. But right now I'm using nutmeg, and that is definitely the way to go for Thanksgiving. So we're gonna allow this to cook again for another 3 minutes or so, continuing to stir it, and we'll check back in a moment. So it's been about 5 minutes from our last stage. It's cooking nice, slow and low. I haven't adjusted the temperature at all. And the beauty of it is that nothing is sticking to the bottom, right? And they're starting to get a little creamy, you'll see. Let's take a quick video so you can see it close up. I think that's great, very helpful. Okay, so as you can see, everything's moving nicely. And I think it's like magic. It's reduced at least halfway. When we started, the pot was half full. And now you can see that it is only about a third, maybe a quarter full. But you can see there's lots of nice movement, nothing sticking. Okay, and now I'm gonna give it just a little taste. I wanna check my salt levels to see if that's good, okay? This will be the tell. So I'm just gonna get a little piece since the onion's cooked. And it needs a little more salt. So that's another half teaspoon I just put in. So yeah, just check your salt levels. Make sure that it's salted. Nutmeg is good, and it needs more pepper. So you don't want the pepper to be overwhelming, but you want it to be present if you're gonna use it, right? I think that's always the key. If you have ground pepper in here, you want it to be present in the dish. Now I'm gonna give that a little stir. Do think I'm gonna add in some more nutmeg. Just needs to pop just a little bit more. So let's get that in. Kind of want to season as we go. It's really important with this type of dish. And here again, my microplane is the superstar of the moment. Again, one of my favorite kitchen tools that I have. That was about 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg, and I guarantee that will be enough for this. So just use it sparingly, but again, you want it to be present. It's an aromatic as well, so we want to be able to smell it. So 5 more minutes like this, and we're gonna come back. Okay, beautiful people, this is ready. Let's take a quick close-up. It is perfect. Oh, there's Daniel, he's clapping. He's clapping because this is perfect. Look how beautiful this is, right? Look at the color, and look how it's not sticking at all. It's gone, I mean, it's reduced. You didn't think, right, when I made all those onions that we would need them all, but look at that. We definitely do. So, caramel in color, sweet to the senses. That nutmeg is popping. I can smell it, but it's not overpowering. It's just that beautiful. Everyone is going to love this in my house. So this is the onion mixture. And we're going to turn this off and let it sit on my countertop. Cooling down would be good. I'd like for it to cool a bit as I work on some other things. So I'm going to cover it with a lid because, you know, I'm not a fan of things dropping in my food. So it's always nice to keep things kind of covered. It's vented though. So get up your next station. Get your next station set up, excuse me, rather. I have my cutting board. I'm going to lay it out. If you have a rolling board, a marble rolling board, come on in, the crew's coming in, get that set up because we're going to roll out our pie shells. That's the next thing to do. My mom is laughing at me. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the pie crust. I do make my own pie crust. I love my pie crust. I'd love to do a pie crust video, but this is not the time. When you are literally making 15 dishes, it's the place to cut corners. It's the time to cut corners, rather. So, and store-bought pie crusts are perfectly fine. So we're gonna use that. We're gonna use this. We're gonna use a little help. So, I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of flour on my cutting board, and this is fine. And actually, if you have granite countertops, I usually actually do this over here because it's great, and then I can clean the countertop off. It's beautiful into the sink. But so you can see it, I'm here. I'm just gonna roll this out. Now I did let my pie crust warm up a little bit, so it's been out of the refrigerator for 30 minutes. The amount of time that it took for my onions to cook was the amount of time that it was out of the refrigerator. Yeah. Got my rolling pin. I'm gonna roll this out. And I want it kind of really thin. I mean, I prefer mine thin for this recipe specifically. It's just how I prefer it. I got my tart pan over there. Good, so we want this nice and round. Paying attention to the shape, because even though it's store-bought, it still needs to be rolled out, y'all. Yeah, don't just try to pop it in the pan. It won't be stretched. This one broke a little bit, so I'm just gonna press it together with my fingers. So we don't want any holes. We want it to be nice and together. I'm gonna fold it. This is a great tip. So I'm gonna fold it in half, and then I'm gonna gently fold it one more time so it's in quarters. I'm just gonna sit it over here to the edge. All right. I love that tip, and I'm gonna show you why. This is my tart pan. I love this. See, has the little ridges. See how thick it is? You could certainly use a pie pan or a springform pan, but I love the shape of this. It's the traditional tart pan, and it also does this. Watch. Hold on. Comes apart. This is great. So you just pop it out of here. You just pop it out of here like this, and then put this on whatever serving tray, so you don't have to worry about trying to cut through it, right, and having to cut up the edges. This is wonderful. They're not very expensive. I would go out and buy one of these. I think I found these at Bed Bath & Beyond or something, but you can obviously buy them online somewhere. So this is my tart pan. I am going to just put a little non-spray stick in here, not a lot, okay? And then this is my tip. You're gonna take, and I do this with all my pie crusts, you're gonna find the middle of the pan, and you're going to put the tip right there, okay? One of the more challenging things about, oh, that broke again, I'll fix it. One of the more challenging things about pie crust is just getting it centered on the plate, on the dish. So here we go. I'm just gonna gently, not really pushing it in, but I'm just finding those corners, and see, I'm just working the pie crust down into the dish, okay? And whether it's store-bought or homemade, it's the same process, okay? Now I'm really working it into that crevice, pressing it in there. Careful not to rip it. I want to make sure there are no holes or anything, because then the custard starts to seep out. So you want that shell to be intact. And then this is the last bit, and it's going to hang over the edge just a little bit, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a minute. I'm just pressing it in. Now, one thing that I love about this recipe is that the pie crust or shell does not need to be baked beforehand. There are some recipes that you need to do that, but not for this, which is lovely, because that certainly saves a step. So see that? Perfect. Okay. Now you see I have some crust hanging off the end. So I'm going to just run my knife. Don't go back and forth, just run it forward. And then pull it back, run it forward, pull it back, run it forward. Yep. And I'm just catching the edge of this Tart pan. And this is one of the reasons why I love Tart pans, because it looks so, the presentation is so nice and clean. Just imagine when you pop it out and you have those beautiful like rippled edges and it's nice and like flat on the top. It's so beautiful. I mean, we really do eat with our eyes first before we eat with our stomach. So it really is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dish. Okay, I'm just taking a couple of this leftover. I had a couple of holes in here. You could wet these and put them in, but I'm not gonna bother. You certainly could though. If it was like a big gaping hole, then I would probably do that just to make sure that it didn't leak. But none of mine are very large. It's just a little bit. And almost 9 times out of 10, that's gonna happen. Okay, so easy. That was so simple. Do not be intimidated by a pie crust. They are very easy. Store-bought pie crust, a little bit of flour, roll it out, okay? Get it thin, fold it into quarters, grease up your Tart pan or whatever you're using, and then find that middle mark, and then just gently work it towards the corner, or the edges rather, into the crevice, and then work your way up the pie plate. Now, if it's a pie plate, you can do this trick with the knife. That'll still work. Or you could do the pinch. The pinch and the thumb is probably the easiest one, where you take it and you pinch it on the outside and then press your thumb into the side, and it creates those little traditional divots in the top of the pie. Okay? All right, so let's take a pause. I'm gonna clean up here, you're gonna clean up there, and then we're gonna come back and put our custard together and then put the whole thing together so it's ready to bake for Thanksgiving. All right, so we're moving on to the final step, minus baking it, okay? I am gonna make the custard. We need our eggs, we need our cream. Okay, so remember the onions are already seasoned, so we don't need to season this step, which is nice. So let me just grab a garbage bowl. I need 4 eggs per recipe, so I'm going to use 8. Okay, so for 1 tart. And if I have leftover, I have leftover. I hate for it not to reach the top, right? I've had that happen before where I have to make additional custard. It's just not worth it. So it's better just to go ahead and make as much as the recipe calls for. Okay, I have 2 more. These are extra large eggs. They're beautiful. The yolks are so orange. We know that means that it was a happy bird. And I'll rinse my fingers off. I'm just going to wipe this down. I'll come back with soap in a minute and clean that up. Okay, this is 3 cups of heavy cream. One recipe calls for 1.5 cups. So it's 4 eggs and 1.5 cups for one recipe. Okay, so I'm gonna put this in. My dogs are playing right here. That's the noise that you hear. Full house as always. I am going to blend this up in my blender. Easy. 1 second. That fast. I could have certainly have done it the old-fashioned way with a whisk. This is much faster. All right, I put my tarts on a cookie sheet, and the reason they're on a cookie sheet is because the bottom pops through, and also when we fill it up, we're gonna fill it up almost all the way to the top, and this will keep it from spilling over. If you're gonna make it right away, which you certainly could, then I would bake it on a cookie sheet, which is what I'm gonna do, but I'm actually freezing these tonight. to make for Thursday. So that is that. Here are our beautiful, gorgeous onions, the star of the dish. So I am going to grab a spoon, and actually what we're going to do first is we're going to carefully fill the tart pie shell. I'm being very careful not to spill. Now don't push your spoon or whatever it is that you're using into your pie crust, okay? That would puncture it and cause a hole which will cause your custard to leak out all over the place. All right, so that's one. I don't want to overfill that one until I do my other one, okay? So I'm going to sit this one to the side. Got number 2, okay, and I'm going to fill this one. Looks like it's going to be just enough for both. I've made this recipe so many times for so many years. I don't even know how long we've been hosting Thanksgiving. We've been doing it for so long. My boys were little. And we love that. We feel really honored that everybody comes up here. We really want to make it special for them. And I'm happy to cook everybody's favorite dishes. When people are really upset because you're not going to make something, or they're asking, are you going to make this? I just love that. That means so much to me. And I know a lot of you are cooking for friends and family, and you're doing it because you love it. I mean, not because you have to, but you love it. And it's always fun to come up with new things and then come up with some old traditional stuff. Like my stuffing recipe that I make is my aunt's recipe that it was my grandmother's recipe. It's just been passed down from generation to generation. And I love it. And I love sharing that story because it feels like it means something. It's like family history. And it's passed on, and I get to give it to my kids who are helping me cook in the kitchen. I know they're not here, but they do love to cook, and they're becoming quite good at it. And they love the family stories for each dish. So it's a special time. 2 tarts. I'm just going to spread this out a little bit. Now, I don't want it to be too tight. It will end up being tight, but I want a little bit of space in there. And again, I'm being very careful not to puncture the pie shell. Okay, so I'm going to very gently pour this in. I'm not going to pour it really quickly. I'm actually going to pour it in. This is another tip. Pour it in and let it seep, not sip, seep into all the crevices. Okay, same thing with that one. And you know, I'll use this custard for something else if I need to. You do not, if there are any left over, you do not want to overfill these. They will spill out of the edge. So it's just a couple of, I'm very gently just running my fork through here to open it up a little. You need the custard. The custard is the binder. So it's what holds everything together. So it's important that you get it in there. And I'll have to do this every time. Okay, this is just the process. So I'm just going to gently work it in. But I'm telling you, every step, every moment of this process, of this onion tart, is worth it. It's so good. Look at that. Look how beautiful that's going to be. All right. And then just work that in. Okay, good. Just sit there a little bit more. I have made this like a quiche. It's also very good. It takes longer to cook that way. So you have to just adjust your cooking time. I think it's $3.75. It's probably like an hour instead of $3.75 at 30 to 40 minutes. It's probably at least an hour, depending on how thick your quiche is. And when I make quiches, I actually do mine in springform pans, and that's when I use my pastry recipe for pie shell. So, okay, I think that's probably it. Now I'm going to pat it down so it's even. So I'm just going to work my fork all the way around. And you can see that, just because I want to make sure that all the onions are spread evenly. But I'm not pressing very hard at all, because if I do that, the custard's going to pop out of there. Alright, so as you can see, I have most of that's froth actually. I'd say maybe a cup of liquid left over, maybe not even. Okay, so these are my tarts. They're gorgeous. I'm going to get in with a video just so you can see them. Here they are. So see, I want you to see the ratio on the side. See how close that is to the top? But everything's nice and flat. That's what we're looking for. So you see that ratio? You can see the golden deliciousness of those caramelized onions coming through. That's beautiful. And it'll be plenty for the night of, for sure. Sometimes we even eat it for breakfast the next day instead of waiting for dinner, because people love it that much. So anyways, moving on. You're going to bake these in the oven at 375 for 30 to 40 minutes until they're browned. If you are not going to make them right away, then you need to freeze them. Don't store these in the refrigerator, because the pie crust will get soggy. So if you want to make it the day ahead, even if it's the day before, you still have to freeze it overnight. And actually, one thing that I love is how well this cooks from frozen. You should not defrost it before you bake it. And if that's the case, then you're probably going to have to adjust the cooking time. So it's more like 45 to 50 minutes. But when it's brown through, you will definitely be able to tell when this is done. When it's a little golden brown on the top, it's cooked. Remember, you're just needing the eggs to cook, and it's so thin, it cooks really quickly. So that won't be a problem. All right. If you have any questions, send me a message. And I hope you enjoy these as much as my family does. Again, it's our favorite dish. From my kitchen to yours, happy Thanksgiving, and see you next time.